this is our 44th Speakers Forum, so we've had many great speakers and topics over the years. The last couple of years, or at least 1.5 years or so, we've had mainly webinars. We're waiting with great anticipation for the opportunity to be able to get together again in person. But we have a great speaker today, and we have a great topic, and we're very pleased to have many CFOs for global companies and senior executives as well, both Indian and US, European, and the rest of the world join us today. And I think that's really a tribute not only to the ICCK and its leadership, but also to the great speaker that we have and the great topic and its relevance. So we're talking today about the evolution of the finance function, and not a small company here, P&G, very famous, been around a long time. And Nirmal, I bumped into him several months ago when we were actually attending a CFO committee meeting for AmCham, and he shared some experiences that he had, and I could see the passion in his eyes, and he's spent time in many different countries, and I knew he'd be a great speaker. So he thankfully accepted this invitation to share some anecdotes and stories from his career with us today. Just a brief background. I'm sure you've read his bio in the flyer, but a few other things. Nirmal started his career. Actually, you were a software engineer at Infosys, but after that, you went back to school, right? And so you were studying in the Netherlands at the Rotterdam School of Management, and then you joined P&G as an intern, and they liked you so much that they said, "Come join us full time," and the rest is history, right? You've been with P&G ever since, and you've spent time in many different countries. You've been here in Korea as the CFO for a little over a year now, so congratulations on that milestone. Here in Korea during a most unusual time. But you started in the Netherlands, and you had many positions: a financial analyst for the female beauty business, senior financial analyst looking at risk assurance. Then you also spent time in India, a short period of time, more time out of India than in India, right? Both as a plant finance manager and finance group manager for India Fabric. And then you went to Switzerland. Hopefully I have the order here right, where you are a finance group manager, looking at supply chain and in the Geneva area, and also looking at FP&A for oral care. And then you came here to Korea last April. So it's been just over a year. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about you, though we could talk a long time about all the great things you've done. I'd rather let you speak about it. So we've got some great slides prepared, and I've had the chance to scan through them. I'll turn the mic now over to Nirmal, and we're very excited to have you. Welcome.
Jeremy, thank you. Very, very generous introduction. But just to manage expectations, right? All that Jeremy said, probably I might be 20 or 30% as good. And hopefully, I'm able to share some of my learnings, and probably, I hope we continue to stay in touch like me and Jeremy did after our first connect, to see how we can leverage each other's learnings to create an ecosystem to reapply from each other. Maybe we move on to the next slide already. Jeremy, invited me to talk a bit about my experiences within the finance function and how I have seen the function transform, and at the same time, how I see the whole function moving forward, knowing what Procter & Gamble as a global company is charting its course with the function. So as Jeremy said, I've been in the finance function for a bit more than 11 years now. I joined Procter & Gamble in 2009, October, so give or take around 11 and a half years. Been there now, had the chance to work in multiple geographies, as Jeremy outlined, and like P&G, advocates the role of the finance function. They see the function more as a business intelligence / strategy lead function versus an assurance or controlling function, as we have evolved. Fortunately, by the virtue of the career model we have within P&G, I had the chance to do multiple roles. As Jeremy said, we are leading a category for the Benelux market, where the big focus area was around forecasting, budget controlling, ROI analysis. I was lucky enough to be part of a team which launched a completely new segment in both Belgium and Netherlands. From there on, I had experience within the internal audit function, and even within that, just to give one anecdote, how transformation began already at a very early stage of my career is our internal audit function back in the days was only about audits, right? I guess all of you know about internal audits. And I was one of those cops within P&G, who would come and look at your books and question you about your processes. And the company asked us, what could you do more? And I ended up proposing, given the length and breadth that we see in terms of business, in terms of regions, in terms of processes, the internal audit function could play a much bigger role than just auditing. Now, how about thinking about value creation by looking at the best practices among the regions and driving process transformation? I had an opportunity to engage very closely with E&Y. I was trained by them on consulting techniques, and we used those techniques to advise business units within the company as to how they could transform their processes to drive better results, effectiveness, and of course productivity. From there on, I was on vacation in India somewhere around 2011, met my wife there. She said, I'm not willing to come to Netherlands, so if you want to be with me, you better come back to India. And the company was kind enough to send me back to India, right? So it wasn't really something which was designed. It was a personal choice, and luckily, back in the days, in India, Procter & Gamble was setting up a greenfield site. It's now our biggest production manufacturing site in India, an investment upwards of $500 million. So I managed the greenfield site and expanded my responsibilities to look at multiple plants within the baby care, Pampers for all you know, and also for Ariel and Tide, so the fabric care business supply chain. I was leading all of that within plant finance, where the focus was all about cost optimization, managing a bigger organization, and leadership experience. From there on, I moved to Geneva, did a bit of regional supply chain, building on my past experiences from the plant, where the company was actually going through a major supply network design change. Around 2014, 2015, the company announced a major intention to reduce $10 billion in cost, right? That was a global announcement, and it has been a hugely successful initiative that was run by our CFO back then, who is now our COO and vice chairman. We ended up redesigning our entire supply chain, reducing the number of sites, converting our supply chain into mega sites to drive better service, better co-location with our suppliers and our customers, and so on and so forth. So I was lucky enough to be in the supply chain side of things, right, at the time when the company's focus was all about supply chain. So had very good experience over there. From there on, I was managing the oral care business, which is Oral-B, if any of you use or are aware. The Oral-B business for Europe and also for India, Middle East, and Africa. And that is where I got the chance to manage the entire P&L end-to-end, looking at a broader market, assigning portfolio roles, and so on and so forth. Again, a lot of learnings, exposure to many different markets within Europe, first-hand experience of a developed market in terms of running a business, and so on. Finally, the company said, why don't you go and run a market on your own, instead of looking at the region. And I was sent to South Korea from Geneva. And over the last 1 year has been extremely interesting. I took on the role remotely with I think it was 8 hours or 7 hours time zone difference. And I remember attending my first meetings with senior management at 4 in the morning, and also engaging, with a very different culture to get to know them and understand the business remotely. We physically relocated in July. From there on, it has been magical. The reason why I put this chart is not to show how good or deep my experiences are. I hope this chart gives you some confidence about what I'm about to say is backed by data and by experiences, by the virtue of working with extremely talented and extremely smart people, within the company. So moving on to the next chart. So this was all about, what I have done. Now, over the last 10 years, I have personally seen the finance function, especially within P&G, changing a lot. I do a lot of reading. I engage with a lot of partners and a lot of folks in my network within the consulting industry to really see what is changing in the industry, how things are moving, and what's coming up in the future. When I began in 2010, it would be safe to say most of the jobs being advertised back then, either via LinkedIn or any other sources, most of the job titles said controllers, right? So the whole idea of the finance function was more about controlling. So controlling was a big part. You have to handle the budgets, you have to control the budgets, and so on and so forth. The second big priority was on stewardship, which I think is still relevant. So, think about the bookkeeping, the account management, closing, the balance sheet management, and so on and so forth. And strangely enough, we would spend very little time. I would say 30 to 40% of our time on looking for insights, and out of that time, a big portion of the effort was into gathering data. Now, I know most of you probably will agree with me. I think the biggest challenge we have is to have a unified version of data, right? So we spend a lot of time in ensuring that the numbers reconcile. And by the time we come to a point where we are able to draft the insight, the opportunity probably is half a day old. So that was the trend back then. And P&G began a big journey under the leadership of our CFO, John Moeller, about transforming the finance function into a function which is more focused on creating value. And as a result of that, all of the experiences I shared earlier on, where I got a chance to work on process transformation, within the audit function, or doing supply network design as part of the product supply finance function, it was just an example how the company was asking the finance function to do a lot more value creation than what they were doing, all along. Along with that, what I have also seen is, if you see the amount of time that we spent in controlling or in data mining, also ended up becoming smaller and smaller, so that our effort, our bandwidth for value creation increased. The company invested in a lot of resources, call it the ERP systems and analytics and so on and so forth. We are nowhere near in being the best, but I have seen the journey the company has taken over the last so many years by creating capacity, by investing in capacity, in technology to get there. And the call for action was very clear. The road for survival would be via value creation. So in my view, and that's my prediction, for what it's worth, right? I personally believe the role of a CFO, who is a representative of the finance function, it will evolve from being a finance function to really either a CVO, which is a chief value officer, CPO, which is a chief performance officer, or a COO. I see the lines blurring much faster than what we have witnessed so far. 10 years ago, someone told me that I would be doing the CFO role of Korea, and I would be doing the sales leader role of a particular channel in Korea. I would be laughing. Today, I'm doing the CFO role, and I run a sales channel on my own. And quite frankly, I can see the benefits and the value adds I bring as a finance leader, given the vantage point I have of having a holistic view of the business overall. So I personally see, over the next 10 years, I see a huge wave of automation coming our way, scaled operations, or in the classic term, finance factories, scaling up in a big way, which then should alleviate the capacity of the finance function into creating a lot more value, be the champions of constructive disruption, and be seen as a business intelligence function going forward. So I see this to be the core of the finance function going forward. In P&G, fortunately, we are in that journey. There is a long way to go, but that's how I see the finance function in future. That said, I do want to maintain that stewardship will be a core. As you all know, the nature of risk is evolving, right? In fact, a couple of weeks ago, we were having a cybersecurity workshop because we have a massive e-commerce business within Korea. So the nature of risks that I was aware 10 years ago when I was doing internal audit, it's extremely different than what we are witnessing now. So stewardship will also be another area which I believe the finance function will need to be extremely on top of, not because our role is that of a policeman or somebody who has to control things, more because that will be one of the areas which could cause tremendous amount of value leakage. So I see stewardship also a big part of value creation, right? So the net message of the whole thing is the finance function will evolve from where it is today as a controlling function or probably a mildly value creating function to somebody who is very, very focused on value creation going forward. So that's where I see. Now, once I was putting this chart, I was thinking, is it only me thinking like this, or is it also backed with data? Is there consensus in the industry? So I will share with you a few charts based on data coming from publicly available sources to ensure that I'm able to articulate this point or the change that we have seen over the years and what's to come. So moving on to the next slide. As I said, over the last 10 years, we have seen a big shift, right, in how the finance function has evolved. And as I was sharing with you earlier on, the whole buzzword is all about value creation, right? Now, when you say value creation, it doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to invest more and more in the function. As I said, there has been a seismic shift in the concept of finance factories where a lot of things are being passed on to the back offices on scaled operations, and that is something which is evident from this data as well. Over the last 10 years, there has been roughly 30% reduction in the cost of the finance function as a percentage of revenue broadly in the industry. Now, this data is from 2019, but I know that there have been additional productivity efforts going in many companies. Now, the point here is not that finance is not a value adding function or so. The point here is there has been so much innovation, so much automation, so much of scaled operations that you could deliver a lot more value with less. Now let's ask ourselves, did really the focus on value creation go up with the cost of finance as a function in a company went down? If you go to the next chart, that is well articulated. What you see over here is the percentage of time that the finance function spent on value-added activities, call it financial planning and analysis or other value-added activities. It has also gone up. It's not a dramatic shift, but versus 43%, it has gone up to 51%. That said, I do want us all to notice that even over the last 10 years, the significant increase has really come from other value-added activities and not really business intelligence, right? Think of it like tax, like treasury, controlling, policy setting, and so on and so forth. That has seen, a significant amount of increase in terms of focus in the finance function. So over the last 10 years, the cost has come down, but the ask from the function to drive value creation has just gone up. And quite frankly, if I read what many of top CEOs and top CFOs are advocating today, their ask of the finance function is a lot more value creation as they move forward versus anything that is not visible to the consumers, right? Now that brings to me, what exactly does value creation here mean? Because all that we said, call it risk assurance, call it controlling, that's going to stay here, and most of it will probably be automated, will be scaled up, and so on and so forth. Now, when you say value creation, suddenly there are 5 or 6 forces of change around us. The explosion of data. Then you also have the explosion of technology, call it blockchain, call it cloud, call it ERP, and so on and so forth. There are multiple forces of change which drives the need for us to have a very clear plan as to how we will use those forces of change to create better value. To articulate where we are on that journey today, if you move to the next slide, the slide talks about data and analytics and how we can use that into creating value. Because as you saw so far, what the finance function has done over the last 10 years is, the focus or the percentage of time invested in real financial planning and analysis and insights has not systemically or not seismically gone up. What this chart, it's a bit of an eye chart, but it's very interesting. A lot of the work in terms of insights and analysis today is still descriptive, which is, looking back. So what happened in the last 3 years, and, we try to think this is what has happened, and probably this is what will happen in the future. Versus a situation where, we are able to directly predict the future based on patterns, based on how consumers are behaving, based on what SKUs are selling in the market at what point in time in the market, in which month, what day, and so on and so forth, right? So a lot of the data we have, a lot of the analytics and the work that we do is still a lot more descriptive and focused on the past. But if you look at the organizations, 90% of the organizations see this to be a high investment priority, right? Every CFO you ask, and I'm sure we will have broad consensus even in this group, that the future is data and analytics, right? And that's where the real value will come from. But if you really ask, most of us, what's your strategy, right? How do you really convert that, and what is the next S-curve you will drive on this journey? A lot of us are, still in the process of thinking, probably, engaging with multiple partners and seeing what part of the technological innovations or advancements, will be a lot more effective for us. So a lot of appetite on data analytics and insights, but still a lot more to go in terms of where we are on that journey. And I think that is where the big opportunity will come from. And I strongly believe the finance function, given the vantage point they have of being able to see the business end to end, will lead this change and lead this journey of maturity. And quite frankly, I think it is paramount for business because based on the survey which KPMG did, 66% of CEOs, and Sachin can vouch for it as well, still would go many times with the gut and instinct. Now, no disrespect, because again, people, the CEOs and Sachin with this vast experience probably, knows a lot more than a system would do or an algorithm would do. But at the same time, looking at the fast-paced nature of how the industry is evolving, how new competitors are coming, and how business models are evolving, we need to get a lot more sharpened, on the decisions being backed with data. Now, the background of this number, 66% of CEOs still going ahead with their gut instinct. It's not that they have a disrespect for data. None, because almost all of them want to get to a stage where the models are foolproof for them to be able to look at it and then make a decision. The challenge is on the maturity of the systems and the data we have today, right? And that is where I think we need to step change. We need to improve a lot more to enable a lot more database decision making with the level of confidence versus where we are today. So in summary, the cost of the finance function has come down. The ask of the finance function to drive a lot more value has gone up. There is broad consensus that we need to do a lot more in the field or leverage data and analytics to think about value creation, but we are very far or very slow on that journey, right? This to me is a call for action. It's a very simple math, right? And as I was sharing earlier on, what I have seen over the last 10 years, and probably many of you have seen a lot more than I have seen in the last 10 years. Either we start planning for the change or we plan to retire. I make it very simple, right? It's either being there or being completely irrelevant, which is why I strongly believe these kind of forums and these kind of discussions helps a lot, right? We had a brief discussion on this in the AmCham CFO committee meeting as well, and there were extremely good ideas and thoughts on this. So I wanted to share 4 areas as to where I believe the finance function should be focusing on, and probably creating a detailed master plan, or if many of us would call a strategy, to pivot the company and the function. And I see 4 big vectors. So if you move to the next chart, so overall, so I think there are 4 areas, right, which I think the finance function would need to pivot to. I believe the finance function will become a data-driven decision-making hub. I would, if I was a CEO, I would be sad if my CFO is not the one who is enabling 80% of the analysis or support needed to make the decision. And we have to get there, in a much faster and in a much smoother way. That will come with a combination of 2 things, right? One, along with knowing our numbers, we need to ensure that we are able to harness the power of data. There has to be one version of truth. There cannot be multiple version of truth, right? Once you get there, decision making is a lot more simpler. Second is, in anything and everything we do, we need to be able to justify what is the business intelligence, what is the insight that we brought on the table as a function, right? And that is where finance, I think, can play a much bigger role by seamlessly collaborating with other functions like IT, quality analytics, quality market research team also, to bring all of it together to really come up with really, really powerful insights. So the first area, I strongly believe that the finance function should call as their top priority going forward is delivering insights using real-time data. Now, let's be clear, right? If you think about the explosion of data today, we have got blockchain, we have got real-time, predictive analytics. All of this is really starting up. I strongly believe each finance leader today should have a very clear strategy to outlay, what exactly data will do for them, what are the right sources, and as a result, how will they leverage all of their time to convert those data into insights. I have set a goal for myself, as a functional leader. In 2 to 3 years' time, I don't want any of my people to focus or to spend any time on gathering the data. The end state would be, I'm sitting in a room, and then there is an iPad in front of me. I should be able to select this category, this customer. These are the 5 things. This is what has happened in the last 3 months, and this is what could happen in the next 3 months. Let's talk about what the plan looks like. That's the end state. So I'm putting a challenge for myself to get to a state where none of my people are focusing on data gathering or data mining. All of that will need to be automated or scaled up. At the same time, I'm also challenging myself, to learn a lot more about what is artificial intelligence, what are the other technologies that are available, so that we are able to get into a mode of predictive analytics, right? Instead of looking at what happened in the past, I really want to talk about what's going to happen based on the past itself. The model should tell me what's going to happen in the next 3 months, 6 months. And if my plan, if the strategy that I have designed is going to be relevant or not, and I would measure myself on the improvement of the hit rate that I would generate by going in that journey. Quite frankly, it's just a beginning. We are now putting a plan in place. We are now talking at the leadership team level within P&G as to how do we get there. Primarily because our business is also a lot more e-commerce centric, where our customers have evolved much faster. So I strongly believe we need to do a lot more and lot faster. So first, we need to pivot the finance function into a function which delivers insights, leveraging real-time data, wasting zero resources on data gathering. And that's something which I have decided to focus on. The second one is I strongly believe going forward, the finance function, and we all take pride, and I have taken pride, I won't speak for everyone. The finance function, takes a lot of pride in creating Excel tools, creating a dashboard, or automating a report also. And these are fantastic things, right? I just want to take that few notches higher, right? Instead of focusing on that, I think the finance function going forward should champion automation and technology adoption on a much bigger scale, even if it is not linked to the classic finance systems or so. Already on a company level, the concept of COEs, service centers in Procter & Gamble are probably one of the best in class in industry, as evidenced by many external publications. And we want to continue to stay the course and see what more we could pass on to our COEs. We are doing a few projects within Korea as well right now to see how we can move away from a lot of transactional tasks from versus what we are doing right now. And as I'm here, I also engage a lot with some of our colleagues within AmCham or also within ICCK to leverage and learn. We will soon be having a discussion with one of our colleagues in a technology company to tell us what exactly they are doing on this space, and probably see what we could learn on the consumer goods side of things in terms of identifying opportunities to drive some amount of constructive disruption going forward. I envision a situation where looking at numbers, looking at facts are touchless. People should be able to, if Sachin is sitting in the boardroom, he doesn't need Andrea to come and tell him, this is the numbers, this is the sales or whatever. He has to be able to touch a button and everything is over there, and he consults with Andrea on what do you think about this idea, does it make sense or not. So I want to get to a stage, I want to champion technology and automation to get to a touchless mode of engagement. I want to learn a lot more about blockchain. I hear blockchain can do wonders within supply chain. It can do wonders within the payment systems. It could do wonders on tracking our shipments and so on and so forth. The last bit on this one that I want to get to, and I hope many other colleagues over here agree with it, is I want to get to a mode where our multifunctional partners for finance, I want to enable them to have self-service, right? I mean, look at when you go to a McDonald's today, right? I really prefer engaging with the self-service machine versus going there, standing in the queue, and then explaining the person with whom I could probably not even speak in Korean what exactly do I want. I want to enable a level of self-service such that senior management or multifunctional partners are able to get the data on their own, probably also generate insights and engage with the finance function on the how, right? Where do you go from here? So I want to get to a high level of and high quality of self-service, by championing automation and technology overall. But at the same time, I do want to give a caution, right? The proliferation of data, it will drive some amount of standardization, but it won't be enough, right? It won't be an easy journey. There are still legacy systems which we all need to get through. In our journey, everything needs to be synced, and we still need to come to a place where all the data, all the numbers, talk the same language, and we will struggle, right? So it will be a journey, and I would advise everybody to plan this whole journey of automation and technology adoption in a much more smoother way. The third area, after talking about being an insights-driven function and driving automation and technology adoption, I think business partnering, the way we do today, it has to step change. It has to really be different. I'll give you a small example from P&G itself, right? A couple of years ago, we announced that our CFO would take on the additional responsibility as COO, right? The company did a major transformation. We divided the business into focus markets and then enterprise markets, which call for different level of service, different level of prioritization of resources on both cases. And our CFO was actually asked to lead the enterprise side of the business, right? Now, the reason why I'm sharing this example is just to show, how the company expects a lot more from a finance function from what they have been traditionally being asked to do. And again, our results on the enterprise side of saying things have been extremely strong, both on top and bottom line. So we need to really step change the way we have acted, and we will be acting as business partners going forward. Case for point is even today, when I'm sitting with our CEO over here, in many of the meetings, the expectation of my CEO is to really advise on the plan, on the strategy. We hardly spend any time on looking at, if this point of data reconciles with the others. We are trying to come to a journey where, the function keeps adding value in terms of business insights and helps significantly on decision making, which then allowed me to step up also as a sales leader, right? Combined with all of the experiences you have, how do you kind of use that capacity, to take on more? As I said, the cost of all functions or people, will be one of the areas. Given the margin pressures we have, it will continue to be a challenge. So how can we deliver more? And I believe finance as a function, has a much bigger role to play going forward. So business partnering, it needs to really transform. When you write a resume, you simply need to say first and foremost, the top skill is business partnering, because in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that's what a CEO will look at. That's what a CEO will ask for, right? Then the second one, I believe, as a finance function, which we should all think about really improving, and I'm personally in that journey, is on communication, right? We all believe that the numbers speak for themselves. You put an Excel sheet or you put a PowerPoint out there for a recommendation, it's self-explanatory. But trust me, no function in the company has to do a better job on communication than finance, because what we speak has a huge amount of impact on what will be the strategy in 3 months from now, if the decision is worth $1 million or $5 million, if it makes a profit or a loss. So I strongly believe that's one skill which personally finance as a function needs to step change big time, because of the role that we will have to play, wherein we are converting a lot of complex data into insights. So we better be very good at articulating and communicating it with people. When you champion automation and technology, you're basically telling people to change their way of life, change the way they have been doing so. All of this you're able to do so only if you can, communicate and influence in a much better way. So communication, I think, is a huge skill that finance as a function should lead. And quite frankly, within P&G, that's one of the criteria which we use to evaluate, how people move up the levels. It's one of the skills which need to be at advanced if you have to get promoted to a director level or senior director or so. That is how intentional a company like P&G is on communication. So insights delivering, data delivering insights, championing automation and technology, business partnering 2.0. Now, not all of this is completely different than what we have been doing. We have all been hearing about it. Many of us are working on it already, and many of us probably are thinking about starting our journey. But all of this will be incomplete without having a talent strategy which is not congruent to that, right? And I see that evolving. And I was just comparing notes the other day, and somehow strangely, when I was in Netherlands, when I was doing my master's, I still have a repository of all the job openings back then which I had applied to, right? And I have seen what was expected of a finance analyst back then, and I was looking at what is expected of a finance analyst today. It is very different, right? There is a lot more focus on financial planning and analysis. There is a lot more focus on being digitally savvy. There is a lot more focus on being extremely agile in terms of churning out insights and so on and so forth, right? So a talent strategy has to evolve, and quite frankly, there is no fixed answer to this. We all especially with functions where the magnitude of change is huge, like finance or IT or market research or so. We need to plan today. What will be the skill critical tomorrow? I'll give you a very interesting example. I was talking recently to somebody who was being interviewed for a supply chain role in a top e-commerce company in India, and one of the core skills they were looking for is how good you are at SQL queries, right? Now, if I ask some of my friends, how good you are at SQL queries, they just laugh at you on your face. But at the same time, I know why they ask, because not many of us or not many businesses will need the old school muscle of just designing a supply chain where the lowest cost is. It all has to be real time. How do you model the route of a truck which goes from Seoul to Busan in a way that it reaches half an hour before, and so on and so forth. So so the skills that are being required and asked of people today in all the functions are extremely different, and finance, will need to adapt much faster than other functions because of the first 3 points I mentioned, which is if you want to be championing the data from so the journey from real-time data into insights, if you want to champion automation and technology, and if you want to be a strong business partner, you better have those skills, right? Otherwise, you have got no right to speak. So it is extremely critical that we get our talent strategy right, and we always are very agile on ensuring that we plan for what will be critical tomorrow. We have to keep talking, we have to keep engaging, and probably anticipating, right, as to what would be relevant tomorrow. The second one, I think, is more on the COVID world taught us a lot. I mean, look, we all are here today engaging on a bigger platform without having to travel anywhere and discussing ideas. And so I wouldn't have thought about this literally a year ago, right? How do you really engage on a forum like this without being there in the first place? And the same holds true today, even when you work as well. Most of you are calling from home today. Many of us are trying to step change how we can make life easier for our employees to work from home or come to office. At the same time, even as COVID goes, I strongly believe some of the practices which have come into place are here to stay. We in P&G right now, we are doing a few things, on those lines to ensure that we hold on to the good habits that we picked up, the efficiencies that we really picked up, and also convert them into a value proposition for our employees. So we need to be very, very clear as to what is the workforce model going forward. And we have to be extremely clear, on a task-based approach. What tasks you think should be done in-house, what should be outsourced, and that we have done a very good job, as a function or as businesses over the last 10 years. But after COVID, what we all have been through in terms of how you end up working will have a major impact on habits and practices going forward. So that's other piece. We need to ensure that our workforce models are suited for the economy, which is also economy and external landscape, which is evolving dramatically. The last bit on our talent strategy is function agnostic, right? And this is something which I am extremely passionate about, as I have experienced over the last 6 months. At the end of the day, most of you, either as in your role as CFOs and also, all other senior folks, CEOs, you would agree, right? The visibility the finance function has on the business end-to-end, call it processes, on your strategies, on how you execute, just by the virtue of being in all the decision-making forums. There is a lot of data, there is a lot of knowledge that you accumulate, a lot of experiences that you accumulate. Why not convert that into something which is more real-time, something which is more hands-on, right? And I strongly believe finance as a function does, given we're talking about the next level of automation, the next level of analytics, the next level of simplification. Finance has a much bigger calling, right? Why limit ourselves to just do finance? Quite frankly, the breadth and the depth of knowledge that we have gained within the function by the virtue of experiences and exposure to different situations that can be used in any scenario, either in a sales role or in a marketing role or in a supply chain role also. And P&G is on that journey today, where we are actively, trying out the piece on function agnostic. Net in net, to summarize, the whole piece as to how I see the finance function. By the way, just to make a very clear disclaimer, none of this says that the work that we have to do on ensuring our controls are right, our stewardship is right, our bookkeeping is right. It doesn't go away. It's just that it has to be a lot more efficient. It has to be a lot less touch. So that's the reason why I don't bring that over here in this list of focus areas. For me, that is base, right? We have to figure out a way of doing that much more efficiently, and it has to work like a clockwork, right? I strongly believe, to summarize, as I was saying earlier on, the finance factory concept needs to be scaled up sooner than later. The more you can scale up to back offices, the more you can automate using technologies like blockchain or so in the operations. We need to do that journey fast. with the operations, the second part is the role of finance itself. With operations largely automated, we need to double down on business intelligence and service, right? And the skills that we will require to do so will be very different, and we will need to be very, very open on new combinations of technology and human forces together to drive that change. The third bit is the finance cycles. The finance cycles will go real time. Let's all get ready. There will not be a scenario where we do a whole cycle which takes a month to put a forecast together because the opportunities have passed, right? Today, if I take a month, I already know 4 weeks LG has done something very dramatic on Kupang, which I could have done. So it has to kind of move, real time. Periodic reporting will no longer drive operations and decisions. It will all have to be real time just because of the fast-paced nature of the external environment. Self-service will become the norm, and I really, really encourage all the CFOs, in this forum, to think of that, enable and empower your multifunctional partners on self-service, right? They should be able to pick data, and they should be able to pick your brain on the outcome, on the insight. We will need to very clearly, set in place dynamic operating models, right? New service delivery models will emerge, as robots and algorithms join a more diverse finance workforce. So do think about integration of, freelancers. There are people who are called as gig workers, someone who comes in 5 days, makes this API for you, and then, just goes away. Collect ideas from the crowd. There are many instances, where good ideas on innovation have come from sourcing it from the broader folks. The data, as I said earlier on, the proliferation of APIs, it will drive standardization, but it will be a long and tough journey. But please get on to it. That will be the power. Data will be data, and they already say, right? Data is the new oil. I hear that in many conversations. And the last bit is, we have to think about the workforce and the workplace in a very different way, because employees will be doing new things in new ways, and some of which will make traditional CFOs very, very uncomfortable, right? Imagine, discussing a forecast reconciliation offline without being able to see, 6 different Excels, right, in terms of what has happened in the last 3 years. That's how I see the future of finance, and also how I am shaping up the priorities for the finance function within P&G Korea, and also learning a lot from my colleagues as well. And hopefully, some of these make sense to you. Some of this, is also congruent to what all of you or some of you have been doing. But more importantly, I'm extremely interested to learn from many of you. I know many of you are doing much better on this journey. So I am very open to link up and share ideas, and probably pilot and try new things together. I hope this was of some help. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, let's go for it.
Thank you very much, Nirmal. That was great. I took a lot of notes while you were speaking, and I'm sure many others did as well. One thing I'm going to open it up to questions, and hopefully we've got some out there. I was curious about a couple things. One thing I wonder is, you've got a matrix organization, right? P&G is a matrix. So you mentioned that your boss is not in Korea, right? Your boss is outside of Korea. At the region.
Two bosses.
Okay.
Yes.
So you have a dotted line and a solid. Is your dotted line in Korea?
Yes.
Okay, but your solid is your functional report.
Yeah. So my boss is sitting next to me in Korea, but my functional boss sits in Singapore. So that's how it is. So we've got two solid lines: one to the business owner, the CEO over here, and one to the finance SVP who sits in Singapore.
Okay, so there's neither is dotted. They're both solid.
Very solid.
Very solid. Okay. Now I was just curious because for a finance person to expand their vision beyond traditional finance into sales, for instance, it is not something that I would say I've seen regularly, right? It does happen, but I haven't seen it happen often. And so that's why I was wondering, because often when you've got a matrix organization and you're reporting solid into a functional, regional or headquarters functional head, then you're trying to please your boss. And if your boss is entirely focused on finance, then your focus tends to be traditional finance or even, a little bit beyond traditional finance if your organization is very dynamic as yours is. But to go beyond that into sales, you almost have to have somebody who's a CEO with a vision that goes beyond finance, making demands on you, and then you're trying to please that person. I don't know how that transition came about in your case.
Exactly. The good part is, to be very honest, right? The concept of function agnostic is not something which we ended up creating in Korea, right? It's something which was called out as a strategy by the company itself. It began with the CEO on a global level by David Taylor, right? And that, quite frankly, has come, in my view, it's my personal thought, has come from examples. As I was saying earlier on, a few years, I think 4 years ago, our CFO became the vice chairman as well. And then he ended up becoming the COO as well, right? We've also had, a few other examples where, a finance person, who was running a business unit ended up becoming the CEO of a category on the region. So we've had several cases or case studies, if you wish, where these transitions have delivered tremendous results. And it's not only for finance, to be very, very clear. It is also for other functions. We've had brand managers, who have ended up expanding into sales. We've had sales leaders who have expanded into finance or brand and so on and so forth. So unless you have that flexibility coming from the top, so let's say in the case of Nogales Asia, Sachin would need to pioneer or pilot that sort of behavioral change or that sort of cultural change for finance leaders or any functional leaders to go beyond that vision. In my case, quite frankly, the company called that as a call for action, right? They wanted to actually go much more aggressively in that direction. And it was all a matter of putting your hand up. You put your hand up and, there's responsibility, out there for you. So in my case, it worked beautifully because the company called that as a core part of the talent strategy for the future. And both my bosses, right, my functional boss and my business leader over here strongly believed that I could add more value beyond what I was doing in finance, and they made it happen. Now, it's not only about me saying I want to do sales and they saying yes, and then they pocket a headcount saving and they move on. It's not like that. This is also well complemented by an ecosystem. There is a very strong mentorship program. There is a very strong handholding program. Given you are moving from one function to the other, there is a strong training program. For example, in sales, we have a year-long program, right, where you go through multiple modules to learn and see how you grow. So one is the tone from the top. It has to be part of your talent strategy. And second, there has to be a strong ecosystem as well, which helps you in the initial parts. So that, while you bring your strength on the table, you're also complemented with the skills you need to do better. So both of those things came in very strongly handy in my case, as I took on the sales role.
Great.
Great.
It sounds like, yeah. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah. Jeremy, I wanted to ask a question to Nirmal. So Nirmal, first of all, a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it. I think thanks for sharing the experience, because I think it's a right balance. You got it in a hands-on initiatives and a strategic direction, right? So I really enjoyed it. I have a question around what you talked about, the future of finance, the data-driven decision making, right? And I think you highlighted the essentials for data-driven decision making. And I know not only CFO, but many CXOs have the attraction or comfort of doing gut-based decision over the database decision, right? And if you want to change that, you need to change the culture probably. You need to develop a culture of data-based decision making, right? And when you try to change a culture, the biggest challenge you will have is the change management. And
Yes.
in my question to you is that, have you seen any specific challenges around change management while moving towards data-driven decision making? And what has been your response or your company's response to that change management process? One of them, you said the communication, keep communicating, right? But maybe something else if you have in mind or to share.
No, absolutely. I am a huge believer of leading by example, right? Of course, the company, it's very easy to, expect the CEO to give a call for action and then expect that, everything else kind of moves, in that direction. So it has never been, an approach within P&G or also in my business unit that I have engaged, where it is just, thrust down your throat. People articulate that this is the way to go and this could be the power of the change. The best way of managing the change is you really do pilots. And I'm a huge fan of pilots, right? And in P&G or in many other companies, you call it as TLEs. You test, learn, and you expand. So success speaks for itself. So there have been a few projects on a regional level where we would pick up, let's say Korea. We are very developed in e-commerce, and that's where we want to test. How can we do a bit more on predictive analytics, or how can we do real-time merchandising, for instance, right? So you end up creating a pilot, and then you learn quickly, right? 3 months, 6 months, and then it's a case study. It delivers results either on the positive side or negative side, and then we use that to then expand faster, right? So the best way of driving change management, I think, are threefold. One, the organization today is smart, right? It's not anymore that, the CEO said something and it will be followed. It doesn't work anymore. I don't think so. Even in Korea, by the way, despite the hierarchical culture, you get a lot of questions. Why? You better be clear on the why. That's number one. Second, and this is, one advice my boss 8 years ago told me, Nirmal, you have a lot of ideas, you want to change the world, but, you need to ensure people are following you. So communicate. You have to keep communicating regularly, right? Every 3 months, either a newsletter or a success case or a success story. So keep communicating. And the last and the most important one to drive this is really, do your pilots, test, learn, and expand.
Okay.
The best way of adoption is showing case studies and success stories. And that essentially has worked beautifully within P&G. And why I say that, Sachin, is at the end of the day, let's be honest, we all are competitive. In a corporate environment, everybody wants to be the best. So if tomorrow, someone says Indonesia did something brilliant, I am pretty sure Korea wants to be there as well, because everybody is competing, to get, a share of the good ratings that exist in the company. So I would do those three things, and then it happens. Now, it doesn't mean that there won't be some part of the organization who won't believe it in the first. But at the end of the day, 70% of if 70% of the organization is there, 30% has to follow, and we have to be comfortable with that, right? This is not democracy where everybody has to vote for everything. I mean, we are okay with the government, which 51% of people vote, right? The rest 40 follow, right? So even with that, so start with a very clear concept, communicate and articulate it very clearly and regularly. Do pilots and test it out, show success stories. The rest will follow.
Good. Thank you. And just one mention, what I like today about what you said, it's, the agile talent strategy. Plan today for tomorrow's critical talent. Most of the time, we spend planning today for today's critical talent, not tomorrow's. And I think I like that. And this is something I'll definitely share with our CHRO guy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from others?
Yeah, Jeremy, allow me.
Yes.
I have a comment or two and a question.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a nice presentation, Nirmal. Thanks for that. I have one view. While you said that earlier in 2010, when you started, it was more of controllership, and today it is about business partnership. We have been I was in the Mahindra Group, and we have been doing this for the last 15 years. But I must say it is always a tight rope. So while business partnership is absolutely necessary, we cannot wish away the controllership part. because governance is high on the agenda for everybody, and it's only the CFO who will be accountable for if anything goes wrong. So we cannot wish it away. That's my comment, that it's always going to be a tightrope walk. And Jeremy, your point about, reporting metrics or dual or, single reporting, I have experienced this last 15 years. My direct reporting is always to the CEO, but also equally to the group CFO. Actually, it is a very good arrangement because all the business partnership I have to do with the CEO for the business. But if something is wrong, I have a support system back in the head office. So if governance becomes an issue, I always have some shelter, an umbrella that, okay, my group CFO will not allow me, I cannot do it. So that becomes a useful tool to have a dual reporting. Having said that, my question to Nirmal was, a dilemma always I faced. Now I have retired, by the way, but that question still remains in the mind. Suppose there is a project, one or two projects where you have to invest. Every year you come out with new products, and it's a must because that's what the competition is doing. You have to stay in the market, you have to do it. So it's not a question of resource allocation choice. It has to be there. And then there are assumptions over 5 years, 7 years for the product, for the project. And you get an IRR, which is above the threshold level. Say it's a 12% minimum IRR that is required. There are a lot of assumptions, and all the business people will have very ambitious and a very optimistic assumption. And as a CFO, I will have a conservative assumption. So based on the optimistic assumptions, you somehow reach the threshold level of 12%. But the heart of heart, going by the past track record, I know it's going to be 2 or 3% if I'm lucky. Okay. Now, what happens to that? And still, I want to give a go ahead to the CEO because the CEO wants the project badly. The whole organization wants the project badly because that's how we have to move forward. So on one hand, I am in a dilemma that we are not going to get this 12%, but still I have to approve it. So we call it for strategic reasons. Actually, I would say there is something like an intangible, which I'm not able to value it. So based on my assumptions, if I'm getting a result of 2% and otherwise it is 12%, and that is what is required. So can I attribute the gap for all the positives, the intangibles that come along the way? For example, the morale of the employees, if I see, and there are 2 new projects coming up, the whole morale of the organization is up. I cannot measure it. The morale of the suppliers is up. The morale of the distributors is up. The whole environment is, maybe even the stakeholders, the shareholders are also happy that we are coming out with new products. But in the heart of heart, I know that it's not going to give the desired return. So I attribute this gap to some intangibles. So my question to you is there any scientific way to value intangibles?
Quite frankly, again, so first of all, right, I would never, when you say intangibles, at the end of the day, anything tangible or intangible will have a value. Employee morale, I think there is a value. I clearly see there is a value. I mean, I have seen organizations, and we do, an employee survey every year. Whenever the survey results were low, I could see that in the top and bottom line. When they were high, I could see the top and bottom line. So in my view, everything has a value. That's one. The second one, as you said, right, the CEO might want to go for it, or the shareholders would want you to come with something new, or the employees would something new. My experience, and in the last 10 years, first of all, if you are listed, the shareholders just want one thing, and which is, shareholder returns. And that at the end of the day has to be reflected either in top line, bottom line, or cash. It's as simple. We can create, the best products or the most fanciest products in the world, but in 3 years from now, if your results are, down the drain, nobody really cares. So I, as a finance leader, and even if I, go beyond finance, I always look at what do all the key stakeholders want, at the end. The second thing that I would do, Vasudev, here is, I do get the point about, everybody wanting to go down the route and go for it because it all looks cool. Quite frankly, that is exactly what a CEO would expect a CFO to play the role as, to show the real picture. And I quite frankly have never shied away. In the last 10 years, there might have been one instance where, despite a very strong push, my business leader decided to go with the plan, and the plan did well. To be very transparent, the plan did well, despite me not believing in it or no. But I have always made it a point to ensure that I lay down the facts very clearly. So that is what your job is, to lay out the fact, lay out the risks, and clearly show a range. This is what it could look like. And quite frankly, the CEO is paid a decent salary to make a judgment call, right, based on all the information that you provide. So I would trust the judgment of the CEO. But I would never, ever shy away from clearly laying out what I personally think about it. Otherwise, I am not doing justice to what is expected from me as a CFO, right? Because in 3 years from now, if there are 10 bad decisions made, which you did not protest, I already know who will be the first guy out of the company, right? So we need to play the role of being the conscience of the company. As you rightly said, showing out clearly what the real risk is and what the real outcome looks like. Provide a range, and that's where I would let the CEO come in with his gut or instinct to make a call, and then we see together.
Thanks. Got it.
Hi, Nirmal. May I ask a question?
Yes. Please.
Yeah. Nirmal, at the onset, thank you. That was a very nice presentation and summary or explanation of what to sort of expect in the evolution of finance. Just out of curiosity, in your experience on the point that you mentioned about data-driven decisions and communication, do you see any correlation, or do you have any examples for how you were able to see a lot of data on the basis of how it's easy now to get a lot of data, but how do you transfer that data into actionable, meaningful insights by asking the right questions? How do you frame the right questions to then derive conclusions from the ocean of data that is now available to you as an organization?
Yeah, very good question, Shivi, right? What I normally do is I always start with the end in mind, right? So let's say I'll give an example of working in the bricks and clicks channel that we have that I run today as a sales leader, right? The big outage over there was our shares in the channel were extremely overdeveloped. We were not really focusing, and the channel was really exploding. So all we had to do, our top measure over there was to increase the consumption, right, at whatever the cost might be. In many scenarios, it could be bottom line, it could be cost savings, it could be whatever, right? So first, clearly identify what is the success measure or what is the output that you want to track against. That's your first starting point, because this has a major bearing on everything else. Never start with all the data you have and then try to convert it into an insight, right? So I first start with what exactly the output would look like. What would be the KPIs that when I see at the end of the month or end of the quarter or end of the measuring period, tell me I am on track or off track. So you've identified the end state. You identified the KPIs which tell you are on track or off track, and that's something which you kind of note down the KPIs. From there on, what I normally do is look at what are the data points I need as input measures. What would be those inputs that would go into ensuring that these KPIs, for example, I need to have X% of shelf space, or I need to have X% of number of SKUs in this particular channel. So once you have identified the output measures, the KPIs, clearly call out what the input measures look like. For the input measures, then go back, what are the data sources you have, and then pick only those data sources and probably automate that into a much more simpler way to see this is how I should be able to track it. So start with the end in mind, identify the KPIs which you are able to measure, and then what are the input measures which will go to deliver those KPIs. And for those input measures, what data do you need? Either you would have the data already handy in your own SAP or your own ERP systems, or there will be some data which you will probably buy outside, let's say from a provider like Nielsen or somebody else. So start with the end in mind and work your way back to identify those data sources so that, as you rightly said, you don't end up swimming in this jungle of data, because at the end of the day, you keep swimming and you'll never have the data which you like the most. Start with the end in mind. Things work out.
Thank you, Nirmal.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for Nirmal?
Yes, sir. I think there is in the chat box.
Yeah. So this question is from Ashutosh. What was the major impact of this pandemic on the finance side, which is there to stay? For example, there has been drastic change in the purchasing behavior pattern of customers from brick and mortar stores to e-commerce. Looks like that is the same. That is one. Okay. So from a finance side, quite frankly, I don't see major impact from this pandemic on finance specifically, right? At the end of the day, if anything, take it for what it's worth. That's my experience. Life has become a bit more easier for finance, right? So if you were in office, if I was in office, there would be 10 requests, right, coming your way or whatever. I guess one of the benefits of, the pandemic and the very fact that we had to tailor our working models, has made the level of questions or the quantum of questions a lot more strategic and a lot more important, right? So I see an improvement broadly. At the same time, the challenge that I see on the finance function, with this pandemic is like any other piece, right? You, as a finance leader, would normally work with a lot of multifunctional partners, right? And getting the decision, getting the discussion, face to face with 5 people is a lot more easier. Getting the data or walking to, a sales manager to talk about, what was the sales in the last quarter or so is a lot more easier. So if you don't really have strong data systems, that is where I think the whole working model with the pandemic has caused a challenge. Apart from that, on finance specifically, I haven't seen a lot of change, quite frankly. But the challenges are the same as you would have on any other function or on business. For finance specifically, I haven't seen a major change. Then there is one last one. It says, regarding automation and technology, could you share any latest technology adopted in your finance function and the outcome? Quite a few. On a company level, we just moved our whole forecasting system to something called as FPP, which essentially reduced the whole forecast cycle by half. So that's something which we just moved in November. So that's one. The second thing, I have not gone there, but interestingly enough, I had my first kickoff meeting on that discussion yesterday with some of the folks over here. It's more about leveraging blockchain and how it can further improve operational finance. I don't know the answer to that yet. That's one area where I have begun my interest as we speak. And the last bit, where technology and automation is something which we are aggressively moving forward, is using Power BI, right? We are trying to assimilate all the different sources of data to put together and come to a business insights dashboard for each customer and each category, instead of running around for one piece of information around. So using Power BI to consolidate a lot of information systems that we have. But I'm extremely excited about what blockchain could bring, and I'm actually engaging with a lot of external partners as we speak to see what is out there to explore further. And I'm very happy to share back with this group what I learn and if it would be of any interest to any of you.
Thank you. I think you've now answered all the questions in the chat room, and many of the others as well. Are there any other questions that people would like to ask?
I actually just wanted to add one point, if I may, Jeremy and Nirmal.
Okay.
So this is just, it'll be a really quick point, but it was about how you mentioned finance, the expectation from finance, courtesy their vantage role should be to transition to a CEO or a more operational role. as from my father works in something called as a body in the government of India where they recruit people as the heads of some of the government companies, public sector companies. One of the changes that he mentioned has happened in the last few years is the expectation of the senior members, whether they're in manufacturing, marketing, finance, or even the MD himself, is an understanding or experience spent in the finance department to not only understand the controlling aspect of it, but bring the vision of forecasting and planning and strategizing into the finance function as a trickle down effect from top to bottom. So that's just something that I thought I'd share with the group.
Very valid point. Very valid point. I see that a lot as well, quite frankly.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your questions. Thank you so much, Nirmal, for your great presentation and your ability to respond so effectively to all these many diverse questions. And I'm sure you have many more answers that you could give, and that's why we look forward to having you as a keynote speaker in future forums, and also just sitting down and chatting with you in the future. Thank you. Also like to thank all of you who participated today and those who asked questions. And we hope that if other questions come to mind, perhaps you can touch base directly with Nirmal afterwards and ask him, and I think he'd be willing to share his insight. Thank you also to Sachin for arranging this and the rest of the ICCK staff. Hope you have a great day today. And we look forward to our next seminar together or speakers forum. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Nirmal. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.